Hi everyone, Bob here, and this is another installment of Criterion Critique, a segment where I pick a Criterion at random from my personal library and I review it for your pleasure. You're welcome. Today's installment is spine number 42, which normally goes right here, and that is John Lurie's short-lived 6-episode TV series, Fishing with John. John Lurie is an actor and a musician who has appeared in a number of films such as Jim Jarmusch's Down by Law and Stranger Than Paradise, as well as other films such as Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. In Fishing with John, however, John Lurie takes on the role of director, producing what can only be described as the strangest little fishing show ever made. Designed as a send-up of the low-budget fishing shows that were really popular on late-night television at the time, John Lurie takes the viewer through these short little 30-minute odysseys each episode, through shark-infested waters and exotic jungle rivers and secluded frozen lakes in search of adventure and sometimes actual fish. His star-studded roster includes director Jim Jarmusch, musician Tom Waits, actors Matt Dillon, Willem Dafoe, and the legendary Dennis Hopper. That's right, John Lurie and his celebrity pals are going on a fishing trip. And you get to watch. First broadcast on IFC back in 1991, Fishing with John can kind of be viewed as a sort of forerunner to the kind of programming we would see late night on cable networks such as Adult Swim. Much in the same way the sort of bogus infomercials that you would often see on Adult Swim begin innocently and convincing enough before they eventually devolve into something far more surreal, Fishing with John takes on the outward appearance of an ordinary late-night insomnia fuel fishing show where John and his celebrity guests go venturing out sometimes to exotic locations in search of things like red snapper or tarpon. However, these fishing expeditions often take a very bizarre turn, thanks partially to the magic of editing and in no small part to the show's brilliant narrator, Rob Webb, who often steals the show with some crazy one-liners such, "I would love a bite of your sandwich," and "Gunsmoke is my favorite TV show," which he just kind of often drops completely out of nowhere, by taking the audience completely by surprise. Before long, their seemingly casual fishing trip becomes this backdrop for experiences with giant squids with hypnosis powers and ordinary locals who have the ability to transform into giant birds. The only real difference between John Lurie's Fishing with John and the kind of stuff that you would normally see on Adult Swim is that John Lurie's humor tends to fly a little bit more under the radar as opposed to what you would normally get on Adult Swim, which is often very raunchy and flamboyant. The show's first episode involves director Jim Jarmusch as they go on a road trip from New York City to Montauk, New York in a quest to bag themselves a shark. In retrospect, this is one of the less surreal episodes, with the comedy more coming from the sort of imaginative post-production choices for the audio and Rob Webb's narration, which includes such left fielders as, what was it, the fisherman awake the next morning covered in sores and boners. Yeah, the sores I can imagine, I can definitely see that, but the boners, that's a mental image I could have done without. Once the two of them hit the open water, things start getting even stranger with the ship's captain, whose voice is sort of dubbed over with this sort of weird, almost, I can only kind of compare it to the sort of indecipherable, unintelligible noise that like the adults make on Peanuts cartoons. And once they really start catching fish, the show starts getting even crazier by adding in these sort of strange, misplaced ambient sounds, like they'll be out in the open water and you'll hear children playing in the background, like they're at a playground or a park. And at one point when they're actually trying to reel in a shark, I swear to God, you can hear cows mooing in the background. They're out in the open water and there's cows mooing in the background. Like, why? It's the kind of thing that you might overlook if you're not paying real close attention to what's going on in the show. but it's the kind of thing that I really got a kick out of. My favorite part of the episode, however, has got to be this crazy shot of Jim Jarmusch holding this ridiculously large slice of cheese over the water while John stands next to him holding a handgun and instructing Jim to let go of the cheese just before the shark surfaces. I sure hope that gun wasn't loaded. After this, however, the show hits a little bit of a momentary snag in quality. The second episode stars one of my favorite musicians, Tom Waits, and it takes place in Jamaica in search of red snapper. It begins well enough with the two of them sort of rowing down a river because, according to the narrator, they destroyed their car, which is something that's never seen on screen. We just got to take their word for it. And while they're rowing, Tom kind of leads John into this improvised song that he's just making up on the spot. It then follows it up with the scene where Tom Waits puts his legendary talent for telling tall tales to good use as he and John kind of go back and forth, teasing one of the local fishermen about these bizarre, outrageous, made-up tales about cheese fish and chicken fish. Not long after they hit the open water, however, things kind of start going wrong. First off, they're fishing in what I can only describe as the trashiest looking tugboat I have ever seen. And only a few minutes once they get out there, Tom starts feeling intensely seasick. They take a short break on land where Tom plays a game of cards with the locals, but even then, after they hit the water, Tom is still visibly upset with him being there. At one point, he openly questions whether or not John has ever even caught a fish. In fact, on the commentary track for the episode, John Lurie admits that things went so badly for the episode that the two of them weren't on speaking terms for about 2 years after the episode. Apparently, they've since buried the hatchet, but let me tell you, if I was friends with Tom Waits, I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize that friendship. So yeah, big respect for John Lurie for taking that risk for the sake of art. The third episode with Matt Dillon in Costa Rica isn't really much of an improvement either. Even though Matt Dillon's temperament is better than that of Tom's, he is reluctant to indulge John Lurie in his sort of comedic efforts. According to John, on the commentary track, Matt was actually pretty friendly when the cameras weren't rolling, but as soon as things start filming, he just sort of clams up. I guess he was afraid that John might catch him doing something silly that he would use to make fun of him later. The fishing itself is also a tremendous snooze, with John and Matt spending most of the time on this absurdly large boat floating down the Rio, Colorado, where apparently no white man has ventured before, according to Rob Webb. And let me tell you, these rivers are just moving so fast that I would be surprised if you could catch anything. It seems like they didn't. John attempts to sort of spice the episode a little bit with some post-production moments. There's like this choir that sings over a few scenes, such as a ritual dance where John and Matt attempt to summon good fortune for their fishing trip. Apparently they didn't dance hard enough. And there's a bit of a funny bit at the beginning where they're flying out to Costa Rica on their plane, and you can hear the choir in the background overly dramatically singing, "Fishing! Fishing!" You know, it's pretty funny, I'll admit that. There's also this bit involving Tacho, an ordinary local fisherman who apparently also has the power to transform into a giant white bird. Like, it's kind of amusing, but it's also painfully obvious that this is just like a desperate attempt to spice up what is probably the weakest episode of the 6. The show, however, picks up steam in the 4th episode, starring Willem Dafoe, who actually starred alongside John Lurie in Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ, as the two of them go ice fishing in northern Maine. This is probably my favorite episode of the entire series. Whereas Tom Waits and Matt Dillon were kind of reluctant to entertain John's comedic narrative, Dafoe just embraces it head on. The two of them are just having a blast, just freezing their asses off in the middle of the frozen wilderness, and their good vibes are infectious. The episode begins with the two of them just sort of hauling ass through the frozen northern wilderness of Maine on a pair of snowmobiles before they finally get to their location and they come to a stop. Defoe dismounts his snowmobile, walks out, surveys the location, removes all the equipment he has covering his face, and then stoically says, "Here." After building this makeshift cabin out of debris that they found just lying around, they begin drilling holes in the ice, and they get straight to fishing. No delay. From here, it feels like the two of them are on like this genuine fishing trip where they're just sort of palling around, fishing, telling jokes, sharing amusing stories. And the two of them have this great chemistry. It's just a lot of fun just watching them pal around. John does attempt to sort of spice up the episode a little bit. There's this sort of, I guess you could say, this comedic narrative he's got going on, where apparently they're out, they've been out there for like 3 weeks or so, and they're not catching any fish, and they're starving to death. They're only surviving on cheese crackers alone. In fact, the episode ends with Rob Webb going, "On January 19th, John and Will starved to death." When in actuality, they did catch quite a few fish, and we even see them frying one of the fishes that they caught. And also, they were only out there like for maybe 3 days. They did have cheese crackers, though. That part was true. I mean, it's funny, but really the sort of natural camaraderie between the two of them is enough to carry the whole episode alone. The final 2 episodes is a 2-part special in Thailand with none other than legendary screen actor Dennis Hopper. This is definitely one of the highlights, though it does hit a few snags at times. The episode begins with John waiting to pick up Dennis Hopper at the airport, and as the camera pans in on him, the narrator proclaims, "John is alive," referencing the ending of the previous episode. The ultimate fate of Willem Dafoe is still a mystery, however. After picking him up at the airport, the two hop in a car and begin their journey to the coast in search of giant squid. But according to John, Dennis Hopper was hopped up on sugar the whole time, and he was far more interested in taking in the sights of all of Thailand's natural beauty than he was at fishing. In fact, I believe, according to John Lurie on the commentary track, Dennis Hopper was probably the worst fisherman of all the celebrity guests. There's a funny moment where Hopper is he lets his inner hippie kind of escape while he's enjoying the sights, and he kind of points to a mountainside near the coast, and he just goes, "Oh, far out, man! Check that out! You only get to see something like that in Asia. That's just like, that is what it is, man!" It's pretty funny. Dennis Hopper was definitely a product of his generation. The giant squid that they're supposedly pursuing apparently was an idea that John thought up of during post-production, as not once during either of the 2 episodes does either John or Dennis even bring up squid. Instead, the 2 episodes kind of alternate between scenes of them like actually fishing with other scenes of them kind of just entertaining themselves on land by doing everything from playing ping pong or going shopping, just going to eat at a local restaurant, mingling with the locals, and at one point they visit a Buddhist monastery, to which the narrator describes as squid monks. In fact, it feels more like we're just kind of watching John and Dennis's vacation videos. We even often see them wearing these huge, ornate, colorful-looking hats that just make them stand out ever so hard as, tourists. However, as we approach the end of the 2-parter, it starts kind of running out of steam. John and Dennis are noticeably tired. This is, of course, near the big climax of the story where they encounter a squid. A squid is never actually shown, who apparently hypnotizes the two of them, when in reality they're just looking really, really sleepy. When the whole thing ends, they basically just take their boat ashore and anchor it on the beach as they go looking for some local place to drink. This does, however, lend itself to one of the most beautiful shots of the whole show, where we see like their boat just up against this pristine beach, and we see this impossibly blue ocean in the background. It's just so gorgeous. It really makes you wish you were there. In fact, it's so good that they use it in the opening title sequence of every episode. It's like the last shot of the opening title sequence. It's that nice. The DVD, however, is one of the few flaws of this release right here. As you can tell, it's pretty bare bones. This was first released in 1999. It's almost 20 years old, and Criterion has done pretty much nothing, no effort to update it. In fact, you can even tell it has the original first generation Criterion logo right here at the top that they only use on some of their most earliest releases. It comes with this little pamphlet right here with an essay from Michael Ahhhh, which isn't too shabby. It also has a music video from John Lurie's band, the Lounge Lizards. The song's called Big Heart. Pretty entertaining, but it's nothing that you can't already find on YouTube in this day and age. And each episode has its own commentary track from John Lurie himself. John Lurie isn't like the best commentator I've ever heard on a Criterion release, but he does have some interesting little facts and tidbits about the episode. For example, apparently for the Matt Dillon episode in Costa Rica, he didn't originally want Matt Dillon. He wanted Flea, the bassist from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. However, the Japanese production company who was financing the episodes at the time wanted a bigger name star for the episode, and Red Hot Chili Peppers back in 1991 weren't quite as big a music act as they are today. So apparently Matt Dillon was the compromise. I also want to mention that the actual menu for the DVD is really, really dated looking. It's definitely a far cry from the more slick and stylish modern menus that you would see on some of the later Criterion releases. All in all, though, it's not bad. And you can get it at a decent price. I think last I checked on Amazon, Fishing with John goes for about around 23 bucks. Usually when they have Criterion sales, you could probably get it for even less than that. So if you're looking for a really entertaining, much more obscure, lesser-known Criterion title, and you want it at a less than Criterion price, Fishing with John, it's not too bad. And that just about does it for my review for Fishing with John. I'm going to go ahead and put it right back there. As you can tell, I have a lot of these. I have like just under like 270 Criterion. Some of them are out of print, so I've been collecting these for years, and I don't just collect them, I actually watch them. And I'll leave a link in the description to my Criterion page so you can see my list. As of now, it's currently unavailable. The Criterion website is going through some sort of remodeling and lists aren't available. It's really annoying, but when it comes up, check the list and you can see what I have. And if you have any suggestions on stuff you'd like to see future videos on, let me know down in the comments section. And don't forget to like and favorite and subscribe and do all those other things that you're supposed to do when you find people who make content on YouTube that you like a lot. You know how it is. I shouldn't have to explain it. You already know that. But yeah, that just about does it. I'm going to go ahead and watch some movies, and I will see you in the next video.